Estás viendo Canal América, televisión dominicana para el mundo.
A Time for Truth show is sponsored by the Office of Dr. Bernard Fialkoff, a periodontal, dental implant and laser specialist in New York City, for over 40 years. Dr. Fialkoff was honored by the International College of Dentists and Pierre Fauchard, and received the Presidential Lifetime Humanitarian Honor from the White House. Call us at 718-229-3838.
Sometimes life can be so damn hard, you don't know where to go. Everything keeps falling apart, yeah. You try to do your best, but only God knows that you've given everything you've got, but the world takes you down. You just keep moving on. Let your fears.
Welcome back to the Time for Truth show. I'm your host, Dr. Bernard Fialkoff, and it's a pleasure to be with you. And we recently returned from Washington, D.C., where we were invited to the International Religious Freedom Summit. And some very vital information I want to share with you. And I want to start out the show immediately with the vigilance that needs to increase in our world over religious persecution and forced organ harvesting, where people, solely because of the religious beliefs and personal beliefs, have been persecuted to the extent of death through organ harvesting. And it's a cruel, inhuman practice going on in our world that in tonight's show we're going to be speaking about, and we're going to have two interviews for you of two of the speakers from that summit, and we're going to start immediately.
So back from the Washington Hilton, 2025 is going to be a very special year. And the energy and the synergy at this International Religious Freedom Summit has been amazing. And we're very lucky to have someone with us with a very interesting incident that happened just a little while ago, and that showed this human being's understanding, compassion, and exemplified what this summit is all about. Mr. Ryan Smith, welcome.
Thank you. Good to have you.
Pleasure to have you.
Good to be here.
Yeah. So tell me, first of all, why did you decide to be here?
Well, I have friends that are the directors of this program, but the reason why I would help them is because of, I believe, what the mission is. So if all people of the world can have freedom of belief, conscious thought, word, action, especially if it doesn't hurt other people, and they can band together in that, even though they disagree on some other things, that's something that's good, because it has people move forward in truth, and truth is something that sets us free. It doesn't bind us. So if it sets us free, then shouldn't all people in the world have truth and be free? And that's what this conference is promoting in a big holistic way, but it obviously in taxonomy and detail goes further than that.
Very interesting, because this documentary that we're making is going to come out on this show, which, appropriately enough, is called A Time for Truth.
Excellent.
So thank you for giving truth to this show.
Truth is stranger than fiction. You can't even make it up. But it sounds stranger than fiction, but it's the truth.
It's true. Many times in life, we think things a certain way, but when we lift the curtain,
Sure.
it's like in The Wizard of Oz.
That's right.
And we see a different reality.
Our eyes are seeing in a mirror dimly, but then they will see clearly when truth is unveiled.
Exactly. And, I want you to share with our viewers, what are some of the things that you're seeing, not just nationally, but internationally,
Sure.
that concern you about what we're experiencing in our world?
I mean, all concerns end up being opportunities. So am I concerned that truth is stifled? Yes, but that's an opportunity. I think we've seen through certain periods of history, especially being the last one with COVID, an interesting movement around truth. There were a lot of things that were stifled that are now coming out, and those things are now unveiling themselves so that people can see truth, what was actually happening rather than what was said. When governments change hands, not just the United States, but many of them, you see a movement toward something. I think you're seeing a movement in the world about truth. People are kind of tired of being, and I won't say the word lied because lied has a connotation of intent, so I can't prove someone's intent. But they feel like they were possibly misled or misinformation or disinformation or whatever, and they're tired of that. And they want, just give me the truth. And you see that in the younger generation. You see that in people that are in academia, in business, culture, the arts, government, and people are waking up. And it can be everything from a large podcaster that totally changes their opinion because they realize, wait a second, the truth was, but I was told, so that makes tens of millions of people at one time be awakened. And when people are awakened and have more freedom, then that's what stopped, if you will, the gulags or the, tens of millions of people being mass murdered by despots or whatever, because truth came. So that's kind of a small port into what we're talking about.
Absolutely. It's interesting because the Surgeon General came out about a year and a half ago with an advisory that he published on what he called the epidemic
Yes.
of loneliness and isolation in the U.S.
Sure.
And that it was actually causing physical and mental disease
Interesting.
and societal disease. And what he said, Surgeon General said that he did scientific epidemiological studies. He looked at them, and he found that the lack of, like this interaction that we're having,
Sure.
not by cell phone, but in live,
Sure.
the lack of that, as in COVID, was equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day, was causing cardiovascular heart diseases,
Of course.
was causing premature death,
Of course.
and was causing all these illnesses. And then when he said that we needed to have more vision and more energy spent, more than what we spend on obesity, more than what we spend on drug dependency and lethargy or lack of activity, that we need to be spending more time on this. What do you think about that?
And when you say spending more time on this, what is the
On
word
social
this?
interaction,
Yeah.
collaboration,
Well, yeah.
community.
I mean, obviously through what happened with COVID, we saw, huge increases in suicide, depression, mental disorders, domestic violence, all sorts of negative things, a plethora of negative things. Why? Well, because humans need and seek each other for encouragement, for understanding, for truth. They get truth from each other. This is the old sitting around the campfire for hundreds and thousands of years discussing things so that they could debate and understand dialogue to get the truth. So when you shut that down, of course humans are going to have a problem with that in all ways, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, in all those things. I mean, why do we in jail put people in a isolation because we know it drives them crazy? Why do we put them in a black hole where they're by themselves? Because we know that will break them. So a step toward that obviously is just going to break them, but at a slower speed. So, I mean, this is just common sense. I mean, I don't even have to be a doctor to figure that out. So I think that the world, when you go through cycles, the world changes when an inflection point hits. Enough people got fed up with not having access to the truth and seeing clear signs of depression, suicidal, drugs, all sorts of things, fentanyl coming in, and they're like, enough. So when you have that, let's call it pendulum swing, obviously we don't want to go be just as reactionary as the opposite was, but you do need to come back. Because then the truth will set you free, and you will be sanctified by the truth, because truth is an absolute. And the reason why you know that, and this is why it's so interesting when people say my truth. I just want to play out an experiment here. Well, my truth is that my $900,000 mortgage can be solved when I give you a $2 bill. My truth is that $2 equals 900,000, and no bank in the world would say that if that's my truth, that they're okay with my truth. They would say, well, our truth and the fact is, the truth is that 900,000 doesn't equal $2. So right there, we have to prove that there are absolutes, because we couldn't have banking, we couldn't have actuary tables and insurance or anything if there is not something. Well, if the domino falls right there, now the floodgates are open. Therefore, there are absolutes. And this is where we come back to, people that don't want to say there are yes or no, or off or on. I mean, even computer science teaches that. We have a 1 and a 0. We don't have a null minimum medium hypothesis of this. You have on or off, and that's why a computer works. And yes, we're not computers, but we have to go back to logic. And the law of contradiction states A cannot be non-A. Two dissimilar things cannot both be the same thing at the same time, and they're both different, because that's the law of contradiction, which is a truth principle. So those kinds of things, it seems like that the world is awakening to this in an age where it was stifled for a while. But we've had this throughout. I mean, what was the Renaissance as compared to the Dark Ages? You see, we've had these before. So it will be another one. I hope it goes on for a long time, because truth is light. Truth is a cleansing agent. It's cathartic in a lot of different things. So I hope that answers your question. I hope it does.
Excellently.
Yeah.
Very, very well put, and so true. What would you like to see occur with these dilemmas, confusions, conundrums, social conflicts, violence, trafficking, all these different things that we're beset by in the world?
I mean, what I'd like to see is truth. I mean, this even gets into AI. We even have a term for this now. When AI is false, it's called a hallucination. We don't even use the actual real word. We call it a hallucination. It's hallucinating. And the reason why is because it doesn't understand the truth, because it doesn't have morality inside of AI.
That's right.
It's not a person with a soul. No. And therefore it can't understand that unless we teach it to. Now that's a total different algorithm inside of a large language model where you teach it morality, like you teach a child almost, but it still doesn't have a soul. So we do have to do some reckoning that in the day of what that's going to be. That will be very interesting, because if people that don't have don't understand that truth is absolute or in charge of the AI models, will they ever get to the truth? Of course they can't, because if they start out with a wrong premise to begin with, if you start out that 1 + 1 = 4.5, you can't have the Pythagorean theorem, you can't have the Fibonacci sequence, you can't do any math, nothing makes sense, there is no calculus, because 1 + 1 does not equal 2, it equals 4.5. So you have smart people that start with bad premises and end up in the craziest places in the world. That's the thing about AI that I'm interested in, of you've got to start with a model that's 1 + 1 = 2. Exactly. So you got to go down to the base first before you can build it correctly. This is where we had the hallucinations of, I'm using their own term even, where AI said, show me the whatever, founding fathers of the United States or whatever, and it came up with clearly people that weren't the founding fathers. And it wasn't actually true, because we can know who the founding fathers were or whatever. And that's just an example. I'm not using that as a panacea of everything. It's just a start. But I really would love to see simplicity come back and taxonomy. I mean, taxonomy, biology class, kingdom, family, class, order, family, genus, species. If we go with first principles, and then from those first principles we work down into details, we can teach everyone this. It's not complicated. You don't have to have a genius mind to be able to go, there are key, let's call them absolutes, there are key facts that we all need to go with, and then from that, we will end up in much better places because we start in the right spot. So a conference like this, IRF, helps with that, saying, look, don't we want to agree that we shouldn't go to war just because you believe a different thing than me? What's that the reason just to kill you? Now, if you're trying to injure me, I have a right to defend myself. That could be a different story. But just to preemptively just say, because you believe that 1 + 1 = 4.5, I'm going to kill you. It's like, we would never do that. Well, then great. Then why is it just because you believe something different about God or creation or creator or whatever it is? Now, that's not to say that I need to believe it, but that needs to say that I need to respect you and allow you to have your opinion. Why? Because I need to be able to have my opinion. So we both give each other space. That's why there's a dialogue. That's why debate is healthy, because it is actually, instead of two ships passing in the night, it's two ships actually touching, and the collision is not a bad thing. It's actually a good thing, because that's where we get iron sharpening iron. You know, sparks fly, but that's a great thing, because that's where debate happens. I mean, if nothing more, that's what all college is for. College is an experience where you learned up to, whatever point, 17 or 18 something, and then you're able to come to this bigger environment where there's people that learn different things than you, and you all can hash it out and be able to get better, get sharper because of that, answering a reason for the hope that lies within you.
Very good analogy.
Yep.
Very, very good imagery. Makes a whole lot of sense. And for those people that are going to be watching this documentary about this International Religious Freedom Summit,
sure,
what final statement or suggestion would you like to leave them for 2025 and beyond?
Seek truth. If you go out with a philosophy of seeking the truth, it's interesting how the truth will find you. But if you say, I want to hide, I want to obfuscate, I want to have my own agenda, have my own ego, my own self-aggrandizement, you're not going to end up in a good place. Why? Because first principles tell you that all those things that I just said, that the last sentence, are not things that will lead to a good spot. But if I am seeking truth, and I am seeking forgiveness, and when I'm wrong, I apologize, and these types of things, and I'm having to speak to myself here, because I have to do that. But that's the thing, there's 6 things that are bad, 7 are abomination. The first one is a proud look. And when your pride gets in the way of truth, then we end up in 1 + 1 = 4.5 land, and it never will work. So I would ask people, seek truth, and know that you're given 3 feet of light for that truth each time. You're not given 10,000 feet of light or 1,000 feet of light or 10 years worth of light. You're given enough to take a step of faith. And through taking that step of faith, more truth is then given to you when you've moved to that spot and grown in your intellect, spirituality, physicality, whatever it is, to move to that new spot. And now you're a different person, and now because you have moved 3 feet, the 3 more feet of light that you're given is actually a better spot to then take that next leap. And it's not even really a leap, it's just a small little chasm of faith that is doable. So if we all do that together, then the things that were discussed at this IRF summit here can be able to be shown of, you know what? That actually would be people building an upward spiral together rather than a downward spiral together. We would each be encouraging each other and at the same time listening, but debating rigorously, because that's where we're going to get better. I mean, I love it when my friends and the people that I had hired, even in business, I would say to them, you have full ability to be able to argue with me about any point that I say, because I don't want to be right. I want what we believe and our philosophy to be right.
Right.
And then everyone is then in this truth spiral. That's the start of it all. I mean, if we want to boil it down, that's the genesis of it all, because there either is truth or there's not truth.
So we're back at the International Religious Freedom Summit with Norishige Kondo of the Family Federation for World Peace and Unification. This is a wonderful title.
Thank you very much.
Oh, yeah, it says everything in one statement of what the world needs now.
Yes.
And tell us, and tell the viewers, how is it that you decided to come to Washington, D.C. to attend this International Religious Freedom Summit?
Yes. Actually, our religious group is severely persecuted by Japanese government. It occurred from the Abe assassination incident on July 2022, and from that time, media and anti-unification church lawyers group attacked us severely. And the government should be neutral. However, government was too much influenced by media report. So they firstly cut relationship with us, and then they try to dissolve our religious group. However, our religious group has never involved in criminal cases. So the Prime Minister of Japanese government changed the interpretation of requirements for dissolution of a religious group over one night, so that the government can dissolve a religious group based on civil torts. And finally, the government filed lawsuits against our church. It was October 2023, and based on civil torts. However, the conduct is illegal in terms of international law. So that's why we wish to insist our claim toward international society with our lawyers. So we came here.
Makes total sense to be here at the summit to make this aware to all the world leaders. Because to me, as you're telling me this, my concern would be the freedom of expression that we all should have on the planet. Freedom of religion, freedom of choice of what we would like to do. And I know something that's very concerned me also in recent years is the trafficking. The trafficking from the standpoint of actually utilizing those human beings for organ donors against their will, using them horrifically, which I consider a crime against humanity. So what if those people out here who are watching this, if they said, you know, I'd like to do something, what can they do? What do you suggest that they do?
So the important thing is that the international society observe this Japanese situation carefully and strictly, because Japanese is an island nation. So it means very close society. So they can, in a sense, they can do anything they want to do, because they cannot be revealed. So they can do what they want to do. However, if international society keep observation over the situation in Japan,
Yes.
then the government or the court cannot do as they want to do. So this is a very important point, that everyone is watching the conduct of Japanese government and the Japanese courts.
I understand. So there's, make sure that we keep humanitarian approach. We follow the United Nations human rights guidelines, which are really pertinent to all citizens of the world. Makes total sense.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And as a final statement, before we go with your interview, what would you like to see, and what suggestion do you want to give those watching this that you would like to see happen in this coming year in all nations, including Japan?
Yes, my request is that the Japanese government should obey the recommendation from the United Nations Human Rights Committee's recommendations. The Human Rights Committee repeatedly recommended to the Japanese government not to restrict religious freedom based on public welfare. However, now the Japanese government tried to dissolve our church based on the infringement or harm over public welfare. However, the concept of public welfare is very vague. So anyone can interpret the content. And this is very dangerous situation, because if people in general dislike our church, then they can dissolve our church based on public welfare. Oh, this church is contrary to public welfare, so we can dissolve it. And actually, such kind of situation is ongoing in Japan. So we need to stop this abnormal situation. So this is my request.
Well, it makes total sense to me. And for those of you watching, you can also find more of international religious freedom and the consensus from this summit in Washington, D.C., where the Vice President of the United States attended this morning, and where we're told there's a possibility also that the President of the United States may also attend tomorrow. So let's actually fight for human rights, for religious freedom, and for the ability of all of us to express. Let's make this year a year of humanity. Thank you all for what you're going to be doing. And Konishi, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
So there you see two of the speakers from the International Religious Freedom Conference in D.C. And a very important topic that came out and needs to be dealt with is human trafficking, forced imprisonment because of religious beliefs, and unfortunately the associated organ harvesting from these individuals, from people seeking freedom who are caught as migrants, from people seeking religious practice of their belief and being imprisoned, and for both then being utilized as animals, not human beings, for organ transplantation. It's estimated that over $1 billion to $2 billion a year is generated from this illegal organ harvesting. To say the least, it's inhumane and something that needs to be abolished, and it is the importance to all communities, all nations, all creeds, races, religions, at places of origin. Sometimes the truth is difficult, but it's important when it's an important danger, when there's a virus that may cause you disease, as COVID did years ago. We need to be aware and vigilant. So I hope this show has awoken you to this danger in our world of organ harvesting and the forced imprisonment of religious groups and the sudden disappearance of immigrants seeking freedom. Let's protect human rights. Let's make our world a safer place. We hope you enjoyed this segment of A Time for Truth show. We'll see you on the next episode. Have a very good night.
This show was sponsored by A Time for Truth Foundation Incorporated as a community service.
Sometimes life can be so damn hard. You don't know where to go. Everything keeps falling apart. Yeah. You try to do your best, but only God knows that you Giving everything you've got, but the world takes you down. You just keep moving on. Let your feet